Dr. Kenan Degirmenci. E participará também desta Masterclass o Dr. Ricardo Rabelo, professor titular do Departamento de Automação e Sistemas da Universidade Federal de Santa Catarina.
So, good evening everyone. My name is Kenan. I'm from the School of Information Systems and it's a pleasure to be here in beautiful Florianópolis together with Professor Ricardo. So thanks for inviting and thanks for the organizers. So I will focus on information and energy in the context of smart cities. Now, why is energy important? After infrastructure and mobility, it's a top priority in smart city projects. And if we think about goals of smart city development, we all know that sustainability is in the core focus of smart city projects. So if we think about energy, one of the most important challenges we have today is the shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And we can see here from annual global status reports of REN 21. In the last 8 years, we had a slight increase of the share of renewable energy. We think about global electricity production from 19% to 26%. So this is global average. And I think it makes sense to make a comparison today between Australia and Brazil, given our backgrounds. So if we look at how we are making, this year we have reached our target goal of 23.5%, which is below the global average. So you guys are doing much better. All right, so Brazil has a share of renewable energy almost 80%. And with regard to the global status report, REN 21, we can see that there are high investments in renewable energy. China is leading, United States, Japan, India, and so this is new, Australia, top 5 country in investments in renewable energy. Solar photovoltaic capacity, top 5 country. And Brazil is doing pretty well in hydropower capacity. So given the 80% share of renewable energy, most of the power comes from hydropower capacity and high investments in other areas as well. And you can see some further data here on total capacity or generation as end of 2018. Now Brazil has reached a new world record in low price for solar power. So solar power and renewable energy is getting more and more affordable. All right? And also demand from consumer perspective is increasing in renewable energy. So we conducted a study a few years ago on electric vehicles, to be more specific on the consumer purchase intentions for electric vehicles. And we have found that most of our participants have the demand that the power of electric vehicles comes from renewable energy sources. All right? So we asked the question, is green more important than price and range? Because price and range are critical factors in electric vehicle adoption. So, of course, this is quite an optimistic view on renewable energy, and also given the background of energy in smart city projects. But let's do a reality check here, okay? So, based on the global status report from this year, REN 21 says the world is not on track to meet international climate and sustainable development goals. All right? So although share of renewable energy is increasing on global scale, we can see that fossil fuel consumption is increasing as well. Surprisingly, but it is. So global energy-related carbon dioxide emissions grew an estimated 1.7% in 2018 due to increased fossil fuel consumption. And more alarming, global subsidies for fossil fuel use increased 11% from 2017. So it's being more and more incentivized to make use of fossil fuel energy. And which is also critical is that fossil fuel companies continue to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbying to either delay, control, or block climate change policies, and furthermore on advertisements to influence public opinion. All right? So we can see that although share of renewable energy is increasing, these things hamper to find solutions to one of the grandest challenges of our time, which is global warming and climate change. So everybody is following news, of course, and climate change is quite a big topic nowadays. And we hear Greta Thunberg saying, listen to the science, right? So this is the science, okay? This is from the IPCC report from last year, and this graph gives a good understanding how critical the development of global warming really is. So currently we're at 1 degree Celsius increase on global scale compared to pre-industrialization. And it is estimated that we will reach by 2040 something between 1 degree and 1.75 degrees Celsius. But this is only if we reach net zero carbon dioxide emissions in 2055, all right? So that's why we need to aim for net zero emissions. And it's getting even worse up to 2 degrees Celsius if there is no reduction of non-carbon dioxide emissions. For example, most prominently methane, which is generated, for example, animal agriculture. Okay, methane having 30 to 80 times stronger impact on global warming compared to carbon dioxide emissions. So we need to take that into consideration if we think about the rise to 1.5 or even up to 2 degrees Celsius. And this has serious impacts on the nature and on us. So I brought this example because it has a regional relevance in Australia. So the Great Barrier Reef, very important to our identity, Australian identity. And as you can see, so what does it mean? 1.5 degrees, these are the numbers, right? 2 degrees Celsius, what does it mean? So 1.5 degrees Celsius, United Nations based IPCC says, on high confidence, that coral reefs are projected to decline by a further 70 to 90% at 1.5 degrees Celsius. And even worse at 2 degrees Celsius with larger losses, almost completely gone, over 99%. All right, so this has devastating effects on us, not only on the nature, but the nature will affect, eventually will affect ourselves, right? And so if we look at the different economic sectors, you know, how can we tackle this problem? So we can look at the different economic sectors that are generating direct greenhouse gas emissions. So we can see that mostly greenhouse gas emissions are generated through electricity and heat production, 24%, followed by industry, transport, agriculture, methane, most importantly, and forestry and other land use. And we can see a small number here, buildings 6.3%. But this is not the whole story. We also have to consider indirect carbon dioxide emissions from electricity and heat production, which accounts for 24% of greenhouse gas emissions. And you can see that mostly electricity and heat production is being generated through buildings, 12%. So we have to add this indirect view to the direct view. And this is exactly what we're doing in one of our current projects. We focus on buildings and more specifically on urban heat island effects. And I'm going to explain, so I'm going to skip these slides here, but I will briefly explain what is an urban heat island effect. So with regard to urbanization, we can see that in urban areas, temperature is higher compared to surrounding rural areas. And this is mostly due to dwellings, urbanization, and most prominently buildings. And you can see that urban heat island effects are leading to costs, millions and millions of dollars, and also in tropical cities such as in Brazil and Australia. So one of the solutions to tackle urban heat island effects is urban design. All right. So here is one example of urban design. It's called the building The Edge. It's an office building which is located in Amsterdam. It's an office building by Deloitte. And this building is producing more energy than it's consuming energy. So they have installed solar panels with their solar panel installation. But also in the building there are different types of sensors that are monitoring very different activities inside the building. So for example, on days when few employees come to work, whole sections within the building are shut down due to data collection of the sensors. So this is cutting costs produced by heating, cooling, lighting, and other things. So this is leading to energy savings, which leads to this formula here. So whenever we're consuming energy and we make use of information which makes our energy usage behavior more transparent, this has the potential to lead to energy reduction. This is a formula proposed by colleagues with Watson et al. And they have come up with this energy informatics framework. So I will not go through detail here regarding the theory within the framework, but I would like to explain based on our application in our project. So we developed a decision support system which is visualizing the urban heat island intensity, which is mainly caused by buildings. And this will help urban planners to improve the building infrastructure and mitigate the urban heat island effect. So these are sensors that we installed in the region of our interest. It's in Brisbane, and we're using wind sensors, which you can see on the left, and temperature and humidity sensors. And we focused on different factors related to urban heat island intensity. So, reduction of building density and height, vegetation, you can develop green areas, for example, to make the urban heat island areas more livable and more sustainable, and also albedo. Because sunshine is being absorbed by concrete and also by buildings, if you regard the whole building envelope as a whole, that's why albedo is also one critical factor in that sense. And we focus on economic and environmental factors with regard to budgeting and temperature. So this is the first step. You can see there are other factors, but this is our starting point. So I will not go much in detail here, but I will briefly explain our optimization model to reduce urban heat island intensity. So our objective function is to minimize the urban heat island intensity regarding the factors that I just presented, and restrictions regard to the dwelling demand. So how high the population density is in certain areas, mostly generated by dwelling intensity. So the more the people live in one area, the more buildings we need, and as explained earlier, this will lead to a higher urban heat island intensity. And we also, from an economic perspective, which is quite important for urban planners and policymakers, of course, cost reduction. So, but to finish off with a quote by Einstein and Infeld, this is, of course, merely a matter of mathematical or experimental skill, right? So, most importantly is the problem formulation. Do we tackle problems that matter? So we've heard about IoT and other very important emerging technologies, but do we just connect things for the sake of connectivity? Or do we really tackle problems that matter? So we can use the power of technology, we can use the transformative power of information systems to make that change and accelerate the shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kenan, for a very interesting talk, especially in this very hot topic, because everything which is related nowadays with energy, well, it's quite important. And I wonder to see that if you go back to the story, you can see that this topic of energy has been tackled by humanity since centuries, and even reasons for many wars. And I would like to make a comment on this, in the sense that, or especially in your opinion about this, considering that increasingly people or houses will be self-sustainable, and this will automatically, or to some extent automatically, decrease the power of big companies and governments. And how do you see, I mean, coming back to the issue you have discussed in the previous talk about governance, so do you believe that customers, so the real end users, has the potential to increase their their influence against governments to decide or to make some pressure on companies and governments about, for instance, global warming, let's decrease cars usage or things like that?
That's a very good question. Thank you for that question. And I think we all have the power to make the change. So I was briefly mentioning Greta Thunberg. She started on her own, right? So she was sitting there, and now millions and millions, I think 11 million people worldwide did that climate strike. So this is what one person can change, and I think we all have the power. So I often hear people, what is it good for, right? So if I, don't go voting, or if I don't care about my own consumption, it won't make a change, right? So I think this is very short-term thinking. So I think we have to think long-term, because societal change is always long-term. We can't make the change from today to tomorrow, but we can start with ourselves, right? So that's why I think that every citizen has the power to make that change, but you won't necessarily see the change immediately, right? So I think there will be quite substantial changes. I mean, if you look at our history, human history, right? So some things were taken for granted. Slavery, women not allowed to go for a vote. Now look where we're standing today, right? So I think we can change the climate crisis. I tend to be an optimistic person. So I think if you look at the graph that I showed earlier from the IPCC report, it looks very pessimistic, right? But there's a range, right? So there's a range, and I would like us to go, to stay at 1 degree Celsius, which might not sound very realistically, but I think we can make that change. And so thanks for asking that question, because it's for me also, I always tell people to, you know, have a long-term perspective rather than a short-term perspective.
Well, in the meantime, while we will wait for some questions from the audience, I loved your equation. It says energy plus information is always, or two brackets, always less than the energy consumption.
Thank you for, sorry for saying this, but it's not my formula.
Okay.
Yeah, it's from colleagues' reports.
Okay. Anyway, and I totally agree with this. And but one thing that I wanted to know, and I could see some presentations today, perhaps there's some lack in terms of research and even real-life implementations of real solutions. Because at least from my point of view, and I'd like to see or to hear your point of view, is that you can, well, we could see, for instance, today or even yesterday in the many presentations, well, smart cities involves plenty of heterogeneous systems, actors, or areas, sectors, etc. Right? And the reality that I used to see is that there's some sort of solutions for very specific or very isolated cases. But in a real, let's say, smart city, all these sectors should be, let's say, work together collaboratively, you know, like cross-border business processes to attend, you know, real customer needs or even the systems needs. And I don't know if you share this like, because most of talks are, okay, in the future, big data, artificial intelligence, sensors, okay, but let's go to the earth.
Practical.
Yeah.
Practical thinking. No, I like that. I think Tan mentioned systems of systems. So everything is interconnected, and we have to take that into consideration. And in terms of, for example, IoT, big challenge, interoperability. All right? So we are forced, or companies are forced to get more and more connected, even with competitors. So it was unimaginable 10 or 20 years ago, but now companies are forced to make that step. All right? And that's why I think we have to deal with challenges of interoperability,
Sure.
standardization, and all these technical challenges to have that system of system and subsystem approach, which is very important in the context of smart cities.
Another point is perhaps related to maturity, because it's very nice to say, okay, let's go for, you know, being a smart city. So let's say Florianópolis would like to be a smart city, but it's a process. And my point is that I see that sometimes government, and to some extent even at the research area, people are not, let's say, indeed aware of the complexity behind of this. Let's just mention one word that you said, sensors. You know, instrumentation area, so in order to support the so-called IoT area, is a tremendous complex area. Dozens of types of sensors applied to different areas, lots of limitations, range limitations. You know, in countries like Brazil and even Australia, large countries with lots of areas without any electricity or basic infrastructure. So how can we talk about sensors, you know? And so my point is, at which extent you see living in Australia, and at which extent you can see that we, let's say, more educated people in the sense of technical part could help governments and even companies to be more aware about the implications, and then to better set up say, the policies to achieve in a more sustainable way, let's say, the maturity level, let's say, step by step?
I think it's highly complex. So I agree that you just can say, hey, let's go and realize a smart city. Okay, and the first thing, what is a smart city, right? So it's highly complex. So I think that's why, of course, implementing sensors is a good first step. But as I mentioned in my last slide, does it really tackle a problem that matters, right? Or is it just for the sake of connectivity? And I would like this to be my main message today, because I think if I see, many products are advertised to be, connected with everything is getting connected with everything. And of course there's a high complexity behind it, but do we really need that? So what do we really need, all right? And of course, given my background, my research background, sustainability and energy consumption, I would argue that we need more focus on energy. I mean, you saw one of my earlier slides that energy is top priority, together with infrastructure and mobility and smart city projects. But I think we have to place greater emphasis on this, and of course we have to deal with the technical complexity behind it. And but I would really like, engineers and other people to focus on products that we really need and that can really drive us to tackle climate change.
There's a question. So, actually, there are two questions, and the last one is very interesting because it's very provocative, I could say. So, fabricating...
I like provocative.
Yeah. Fabricating the solar panels emits greenhouse gases and also creates waste.
Sorry? What is creating waste?
Fabricating.
Fabrication.
The solar panel, production, manufacturing
yeah.
produces, let's say, some waste gases, pollution to some extent. Yeah.
So, are we talking about clothes and fashion, or?
No. The whole process of producing solar panels.
Solar panels.
So the
all right.
So the manufacturing process itself.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we talk about clean power generation, shouldn't it apply to the entire process instead of just, let's say, the own manufacturing itself? Yet, and considering the development on nuclear energy, so it's the provocative part, wouldn't it be the greenest choice?
Now, I think I mentioned during my talk, I would like to focus on us. And whatever happens to nature, happens to us, all right? So we're doing it for our sake, right? To find solutions for climate change. And if we think about nuclear power, of course, we can reduce carbon dioxide emissions by going nuclear. But is it really good for us? I mean, look at our past history regarding nuclear generation. It's very risky. There are high risks going there. So I would say, of course, we can reduce carbon emissions, but there are other risks evolving by going there, right? And of course, currently there still is. And so I would say this was the second part of the question. So the first part of the question regarding with regard to considering the whole life cycle of producing solar panels, absolutely agree. So we have to look at the whole life cycle of things, right? So, and I was mentioning our study on electric mobility. That's a big topic in the transition from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles. To have a look at the whole life cycle. I mean, just because we have electric vehicles on the road doesn't mean that we are completely green now. Where does the power come from? And it was very visible in our study that most of our participants, even though literature, electric vehicle literature says price and range are the most important factors. That's why I like provocative questions, because our title includes a provocative question. Is green more important than price and range? And our participants said yes, it is more important. We want a true green alternative. So of course, with solar panel manufacturing, we must consider the whole life cycle, and we want a true green alternative to current power generation if we want to go to solar power generated renewable sources.
More or less, or 1 or 2 years ago, I've read a paper that tried to point out, let's say, the advantages of, I don't know how to say this in English properly, aeolic or wind towers. Is it wind towers or aeolic energy?
Wind turbines?
Yeah, exactly.
Wind turbines.
So including the tower, etc. So I've read that the amount of water, energy, and etc. that you waste along the full life cycle of this sometimes, let's say, didn't pay off. End of the day, considering the life cycle of the own equipment, which varies from 10 to 20 years. I don't know if you are aware about this. So on one hand, we are trying to, let's say, to create incentives to invest in so-called green energy, sustainable stuff. But the other hand, and pretty much related to this previous question, we waste, or we used to waste lots of, let's say, energy to produce this.
So I would like to respond to this, because I think this is a very important point that you're making here. If we look at, because people are concerned with this, they want to know, we're investing. You've seen the investments, high investments, China, United States, Australia, and high capacities, Brazil, in renewable energy capacities. So, is it truly green alternative? I think this is the question, and I think many people are concerned. But we have to think about, I was mentioning in one of the slides, fossil fuel companies are putting heaps of money to influence public opinion. Okay, so we all know about fake news. So there are wrong numbers circulating in the internet, and I don't want to say that you bring up wrong numbers here. I don't want to say that, but what I want to emphasize is that we have to be careful with the information that we receive through internet, through friends, family members, or anyone telling us any. One of my friends recently sent me an article about NASA would claim that climate change is not made by humans, not by us, right? So, but that's a false claim, of course. You can easily check, there are fake news checks on the internet, so you can easily check, and NASA never made that statement. So it's totally ridiculous, all right? But this is maybe an extreme example, right? So we really have to be careful with the information that we receive from different kinds of sources. But of course, I take concerns seriously, and we have to respond to this. So we can't just say, just by making that transition from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles, or just by investing in solar panels and making that change, transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy, everything gets better. So we have to have a look at the whole story, the complete background of what's going on, the whole life cycle. This is very important.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to see your point of view, because when I read this article, so I didn't, let's say, see from this fake news point of view. So I just wanted to say, oh, well, there's lots of energy, let's say, in a broad sense, let's say, waste when producing, let's say, all this stuff.
Right. I agree. So there is carbon dioxide emissions produced, even by solar panel installation and other renewable energy-related technologies. But we always have to make the comparison to the state of the art. All right? And if we make that comparison, I'm pretty sure that changing to renewable energy is better solution for us.
All right. There's a second question from the audience. So, considering that smart cities consume more energy, which would be a viable way to produce energy without fossil fuels?
I think about that question. I'm not sure if I get it right. So can you repeat the question?
So consider that smart cities consume more energy because
Yeah.
normally as you have
Oh, yeah.
big city,
Okay.
lots of things concentrated to
This
support.
is a very good point. Yeah, very good point. We talked about AI. We talked about blockchain. There is, I think, Kevin mentioned what kind of computational performance this requires. All right. So everything is not that sweet and.
So it's related to your equation.
Sorry.
It's related to that equation.
Yeah. It's equated. Yeah, it's related to that equation because we have to absolutely. So this formula is perfect. It's a perfect response to this question because we always have to be. We have to make our energy usage behavior transparent to us, so we can understand our energy usage behavior better. And so whenever we make use of blockchain technology to reduce energy consumption, or whenever we make use of AI to tackle climate change problems, we might not be aware of the high intensity of computational performance, which is of course related to energy consumption, because computational performance is highly energy consumptive. And there was a nice example that it was one of the recent tweets that I saw that making use of AI can lead to extreme energy consumption, which is of course from that perspective not a good way to go. But following that formula, we have to understand the impact of our behavior on the natural environment, and that's why we have to be careful with these topics such as AI, blockchain. I'm not saying that this might not lead to environmental positive results, but I would like to emphasize that we have to understand the environmental impact to implement these technologies. And if we follow that formula, it's a very concise formula, but it's so powerful. Because if we just consume energy without the understanding of the environmental impact, that's why we require information. So we need the information to collect data. That's why we're implementing the sensors. So we want to know what's going on, right? So we collect the data, so we get more information, and we get a better understanding of our energy consumption.
But then I would reply to you with, let's say, another provocative question. Yes, of course, I totally agree with your point of view and the rationale behind of this question. But on the other hand, the cost of energy generation is decreasing exponentially. So there is a trend which says that in at least, or at most 5 or 10 years, the kilowatt hour would cost less than 10 cents. So would be the cost of energy an issue in the future? Perhaps not. So what's the matter, let's say, wasting lots of energy if the costs for their generation is so low?
Well, I think
it's just a provocative question.
Yes, it is, because I would argue that I know now today we're always looking at economic numbers, right? So the quality of a nation is measured by economic numbers, and I would argue that this is a wrong approach. All right, we have to have a triple bottom line approach. So if we don't do that, there's quite a popular book that is considering this approach to be some sort of cannibalism. Okay, so and I would agree with that, because we have to look at the whole picture. We have to apply a triple bottom line approach, so not only the economic perspective but also the social and environmental perspective. And if we look at these, of course it gets more and more affordable. It was one of my slides that Brazil has achieved a new world record in low price for solar power. So it gets more and more affordable.
Self-supplying.
Self-supplying, yeah. So, but we have to look at the whole story here, and that's why I would argue that due to the, it's not that we're just using renewable energy. If we think about smart grid, all right. So we need a high predictability, and resources are always coming to an end. So it's not infinite. We can't just use renewable energy to an infinite measure, all right? So it always comes to an end, so we need better predictability. And if we just say, okay, it doesn't cost so much, so I will increase my energy consumption, and this can be a rebound effect, of course, right? So we see it's a green resource, we see a price is dropping, so I increase my energy consumption. But I think this will lead to other problems. So that's why we always have to consider energy reduction as a viable solution to improve environmental sustainability. And that's why I would argue that economic is just one. It's very important, and I know for most companies it's of course homo economicus. It's the main target to reduce costs, which you can, of course, by reducing energy consumption. It's good for the environment, and it's good for monetary purposes, right? So what we call energy efficiency, eco-efficiency. All right, eco-efficiency. So we reduce energy, we reduce costs. It's a win-win situation. But from my research and colleagues also arguing, the ultimate solution has to be eco-effectiveness. So we have to make that fundamental restructure of the system, that we not only reduce environmental degradation, but we achieve a fundamental restructure of the system. And one example for this would be the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy.
So actually, I don't have more questions from the audience. I don't know if you have. Oh yes, so please, you're my guest.
If you don't mind, I have a question, but question attached to a short comment. So the question is, are we developing smart cities for dumb or lazy people? The rationale of this question is, you talk about sensors and smart buildings. Most of the conversation was around energy, but the parts that I'm picking is the sensors and smart buildings. And the context to this question is that the building that my office is at, my university, refurbished 7 years ago. Ashant has an office in that building as well. It's refurbished to become smart. There are motion detectors, there are temperature detectors, there are smoke detectors. Okay? So when we go into our offices, if you make a movement, it's very common, the lights turn on, and if there isn't, it turns off. My next office, it's lights on 24 hours, because motion detector doesn't work.
And body sensors, internal body sensors.
And there was an electrician the other day for another electric fault, and he told me that they need to turn off the power for a very short while. And I mentioned, please look into the office next door. And he said, we are aware of the problem, but we won't do anything. And I said, why? $500, the cost of this detector. And he said, university decided, Office of Facilities decided to not replace them because the energy savings are not $500. So it doesn't worth replacing it. And he said, turn it off. And I said, look, this is what I do in my office, but the other person doesn't do it. So the question is, are we developing smart solutions for people who cannot turn off their power? Or lazy, or intentionally or unintentionally dumb people?
Thank you for your comment on think this is a very good point because if we think about sensor technology, and I think we talked about earlier, of course there is the risk of greenwashing, right? So whenever we implement technology and we try to find better solutions to improve environmental sustainability, of course reputation is always one big point that is driving companies to make that change, right? So from that perspective, I would argue that it can be quite risky for companies to go into that direction. There are many prominent examples that show that it can hurt companies' reputation at a very serious level. So that's why I think I would give the recommendation to companies, you know, to have a better understanding of the whole picture, and also to listen to the staff, right? Listen to the staff, and you know, I have a positivist research background. That's why I'm always interested in the experience people are making. This is a very good example. So right, so to check on what's going on, and to make that step and take it very seriously, what people are saying or complaining about, or whatever needs to be changed, and having a look at it also from different perspectives. So not just for the sake of increasing reputation, which is eventually going to hurt reputation if we go that way, and do some sort of greenwashing, which can be quite problematic for any kind of organization. It can be a non-profit organization, it can be a for-profit organization. So this can be quite critical. What's your view on that?
Yeah, so I would for a complementary, answer. Actually, from the technology point of view, regarding that we already have, you can do everything you want nowadays. It's impressive how sensors area improved from the technology point of view. Since micro sensors to huge sensors, for everything you want. The point is, what do you want to know from this? So if you install many sensors, whatever the type of they have, what are your goals? What do you want to supervise, to control, to monitor, etc. So first of all, you as a company should have a kind of plan. Alright, so from the management perspective, from the security perspective, to control many things, what are our goals? So having this in mind, then you can specify which kind of sensors and type of sensors, for instance, if it's necessary to use such a sensor for lazy people, or perhaps in some other areas, or some types of different offices for maintenance, etc. So other types of sensors, not for lazy people, etc. So it's a matter of, first of all, having a kind of big picture, and to have this plan, and then to indicate which kind of sensors are the most suitable for this. But from the technological point of view, I could say, between brackets, everything is possible nowadays. So it's just a matter of, business models, and to have companies, available to produce this.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm not sure if it was Marcus or another presentation. Currently, we have a high focus on the technology. So I think we need more people-oriented focus, all right, to deal exactly with these kinds of challenges that we encounter. So this might also be due to if we talk about IoT, AI, blockchain, these are emerging technologies, right? So it's a very technocentric approach. But I think it would be wise to have us, the people, in the core focus of this, and which doesn't exclude the nature, because as I said, we are dependent on nature. Okay, nature doesn't need us, but we need nature.
I forgot to mention one very important thing. it refers to privacy, because in the past you were allowed to monitor everything you wanted. But nowadays, regarding the newer laws, yeah, so you should also consider, okay, for this office, for this kind of person, for this kind of role, you are allowed or not to monitor this, or not that. Well, if you don't have any questions or comments, and regarding we are, let's say, almost on time, regarding the time that you had, perhaps you could closure the session. Thank you very much, Professor Kenan, for a very nice presentation and exciting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Muito obrigado então aos nossos painelistas, vou fazer uma foto deles. E chegamos então ao fim das atividades de hoje. Amanhã é o nosso último dia do Knowledge Series World Summit 2019 e esperamos todos vocês para mais um dia de troca.